everyone, and happy Wednesday. It is a beautiful day here in the Washington, D.C. area. I hope it's lovely where you are as well. I'm Stephanie Stahl, General Manager for the Content Marketing Institute, and today is Webinar Wednesday for us, and we've got a great discussion for you. We're going to give you some fantastic expert guidance on content tracking and rights management. Before I introduce our guest speaker, please take a look at this slide. A few things I'll point out. You can ask questions at any time. Look for that Q&A box on the console. Put your question there, hit submit, and we'll try to answer all your questions after the presentation. Also look for that folder widget. From there, you can download a copy of the slides as well as some other great resources to take along with you. And in about 24 hours or so, we will send you a link to the recording of today's live session so you can watch it on demand or share with any of your colleagues. All right, please a warm Wednesday welcome to Greg Guest. He is the VP of Product Management at Fidel. So good to have you here, Greg. I think you're joining us from New York, right?
Yes, it's a gorgeous spring day here in New York as well. So it's great to see you, Stephanie. Great to be back here with you doing another webinar for CMI. So thanks for having me today.
Looking forward to it, and I'll see you in just a little bit for some Q&A.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks everybody for joining. We got a great crowd here today as well. So thank you to all of you for taking the time today to join us. We have a really interesting discussion today. I'm really excited about this topic. It's an exciting kind of cutting edge topic that we're looking at. Past couple times I've been here at CMI, we've talked about rights management and brand compliance. Today we're going to talk really about content tracking and monitoring in a session that we're calling, Do You Know Where Your Brand Assets Are Hiding? So where are your brand assets and how do you keep track of your digital assets post-distribution once they're published? And no matter who you are, what type of organization you're with, likely this is going to be something that you deal with from time to time, which is having to know where your assets are after you've published them. And even if you're a content creator at the front end of the process, this still relates to you because you're going to ultimately be responsible for putting assets together, creating assets that do adhere to things like compliance or rights restrictions, and making sure that those get delivered or published in a way that enforces that. If you're from the legal end of your organization, obviously this is a hot button topic for you as far as it relates to the risk of having assets published in ways or places where they shouldn't be. If you're with an agency, again, you're a partner to companies, you have to be adhering to their compliance or their enforcement around where your assets are. And in all cases, you might have to react quickly to be able to find assets and come up with strategies around your assets, depending upon where they've been published. So hopefully that's all of you in the audience here, and you'll see how this relates to what you do and why it's important. So why not just publish everything and forget about it, right? It's gone. I did the hard work. I did put my content together. I published it. I can move on to the next thing. Well, there's several reasons why not to do that and why you need to be mindful of your content that has been published and continue to monitor and track that content. The top of the list is misuse and the risk of litigation or lawsuits around misuse coming from talent or other folks that you've licensed content from. So if you've published content somewhere it shouldn't be, you might not know that until later when someone sees it. If you publish content that has an expiration date, you want to be able to track and monitor that against the expiration date and the rights to make sure that you take that content down and you don't end up in a lawsuit, which can hurt you both financially, and it can also, depending upon the situation, hurt your brand reputation. So that's top of the list for sure. But there's other reasons. You might have corporate governance policies, which you need to adhere to as far as content that's published. You might be working with a lot of partners, and the partners are using your content in ways that you want to make sure that you can know where they're using your content and how you're using your content, because ultimately you're still responsible for it, even if your partner's using it. You might want to retain brand consistency. So you might have certain brand consistency guides or guidelines that you want to adhere to, and you want to be able to look out there and make sure that those are being adhered to and that your content is sticking with your guidelines and remaining consistent. And then you may have campaigns and initiatives that you want to be able to track kind of the relevancy of content across the omni-channel ecosystem in order to make sure your campaigns or your initiatives remain relevant to where the content's being published. So there's a bunch of different things relating to rights, to risk, to consistency, to brand management, to strategy, that are good reasons why you don't just want to throw your content out there and forget about it. You actually want to be able to monitor it, track it, and understand the current status of it as it relates to things like restrictions. So there's some certain impacting events that might occur that might actually demand that you very quickly can identify where your content is in order to react to certain things. And some of those are rebranding. So companies typically go through a rebranding every 5 to 10 years, I think is the statistic for that. So that's like a logo change. Recently, a couple of years back, there was a swath of companies that had to react to certain things and change their name of their company. Or it might be just changing your corporate messaging or your brand. And in that case, you're going to want to be able to identify where your logo, your old logo, or your old brand messaging is, so that you can make sure that it's revised or pulled down to go with your rebranding. You might also be more related to a specific campaign. So you might have a campaign that you've put out there that you need to put to bed or to take down so it doesn't get stale. Maybe it's related to a big one-time sporting event or a holiday or something like that, where you want to be able to find all the content you did for that particular campaign or related to that event, so that you can make sure that it comes down so your brand doesn't seem stale. I mentioned rights and rights restrictions. If you have content that has talent with expiration rights, that could be a big impacting event. And all of a sudden you reach the expiration of a talent agreement and wow, our agreement with this talent is expiring and we need to go out and find all the content for that talent so that we can pull it down. And in our demo today, we're gonna focus a little bit more on a use case similar to that. You might have an event related specifically to your brand ambassador. This actually is part of our use case that we're going to look at today as well. You might have, for example, a scandal that happens. We see that happen all the time, but it could also be an opportunity. It could be, your brand ambassador wins an Oscar. And so you want to maximize your proliferation of content featuring that brand ambassador. So, reacting to something that happens, you might need to quickly understand where your content is so that you can adjust your strategy. Or it just might be a channel strategy that you're rolling out and you want to be able to look across a particular channel in the ecosystem and see how that brand is, how your brand is appearing across a particular channel strategy, and make sure you devise a strategy around keeping that content in line with whatever your strategy is. So these are events that could occur at a point in time where you have to then say, okay, wow, I need to immediately go out and find content related to this event so that I can have a strategy around it or adjust my content accordingly. So let's take a little poll. I love having interactive webinars, and the audience here at CMI is always eager to participate. So I hope you will. I've got a little poll here of just wondering how many of you have experienced an event like that in your company. Have you gone through a rebranding of corporate messaging? Have you had to put an old campaign to bed or launched a new campaign? Have you dealt with expiring talent contracts? Have you had a brand ambassador where something has happened that you've had to change your strategy around your brand ambassador? Or do you just roll out channel strategies, and have you rolled out channel strategies and had that affect kind of where your content is, or having you to worry about where your content is? And you can check as many that apply. You might be dealing with all these. I think if you stay at it long enough, you end up encountering all of these at a point in time. So I'm curious to see what we get there. So just give it another second for everybody to chime in if you'd like to participate there. We have a nice big crowd of diverse folks today, so thanks again for taking the time to join. So okay, I think almost got a good response there. So let's see what we're looking at here. Good reflective of the crowd. So rebranding, obviously at the top. I think, as I mentioned again, most companies go through a rebranding effort every 5 to 10 years. So that's frequently happening. You're doing a lot of campaigns, so it's not surprising that, putting to bed an old campaign would be at the top of that list as well. Still a lot of experience across all of these things with expiring talent contracts, rolling out strategies, and then, thankfully less in it relating to a brand ambassador at the low end. So that means that's good because you're not having to react quickly. But we are going to look at what happens if you do have to react quickly. So thanks for your participation in that poll. I appreciate that. Good response there. So it's a lot to keep track of, right? Because you have all this content and it's going out across potentially tens or hundreds of sites. Some of the larger global companies we deal with literally are managing hundreds of different channels and sites that they're publishing their content to. Add to that the fact that some of that content some of it's controlled by you, but some of it is going out to partner ecosystems, retailer ecosystems, gets broader and broader, and then harder to monitor and harder to keep track of. In addition, you have content that gets changed or manipulated before distribution. So depending upon, maybe it's regional or geographical, or maybe it's by brand or department, people are changing things for their needs, for their specific strategy. They might be cropping or recoloring or transforming images. They might be editing video clips in different ways, repurposing content within other videos, or combining these things. So when you put that all together, hundreds of sites, partners that you're working with, assets of all varying types of images, videos that are getting changed and transformed, it really is a big pile of needles that you're looking through there for a needle in a pile of needles. And so that's why you really need tools to do it. It's very hard to do this stuff manually, right? And go out and check sites manually and check social feeds manually for images and make sure you're capturing all the images and variations. Almost impossible to do unless your scale is extremely small. So you're going to need some tools. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get through today, is for you to start thinking about what kind of tools do you need in order to have a strategy around tracking and monitoring your assets. So there are, let's do a poll before we get to that. Let's have a poll here just to see what scale we're dealing with in the audience. So one more poll, and then I won't ask you any more questions, I promise. But just curious, where do you fall in that scale of how many different sites are you publishing content to? And that could include things like your website, so your corporate website, your brand websites. That could include your social media, like your Facebook, your Instagram, your YouTube, et cetera. Anywhere where you're publishing your digital content. Just curious if we're on the low end of that, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20, 40, 40 plus. Again, when we deal with some of the large companies, it really can easily get up over 50 to 100 sites. So just curious, who's here today, and how big is your pile of needles, I guess, is the question there. Good number of you responding, I can see. So let's see what we got. Good interaction. Thank you very much for that. So let's see. So 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 at the top of the list. Okay. So on the lower end, 5 to 10, about half of you 5 to 10, half of you 0 to 5. Not so many on the upper scales here. Okay, great. But hopefully your business is growing and you're going to have more and more of those, and different channels are coming about every day. And even if you're tracking 10 different sites, still really presents a challenge manually to keep track of 10 different websites or social media feeds that you're publishing to. I guess if you're doing maybe, one or two, it's a little bit easier to do that. But I want you to kind of be thinking of and be aware of what's out there that you can use as you start to scale and grow to a larger ecosystem, what tools you can employ to do this with. So when you think about tracking and monitoring, there's really a few key requirements that you have to think about and have the capabilities for. The first one is to be able to capture information about your talent and about the rights information related to your talent and the photos and videos that you're using talent in. And at Fidel, we do an awful lot of rights management work. So I can certainly dive deep in that area. Today, I'm going to focus more on really content tracking and monitoring, not explicitly on rights management, but you can't really talk about one without the other, because expirations is one of the biggest things you're going to want to track post-publication. And in order to track expirations and expiration status, as well as rights violations, you need to be able to capture that rights information, and you need to tie it back to the talent and the agreement with that talent that you had that gives you those rights. So that's going to be a key requirement if you want to be able to track expirations and violations for published content. Then you're going to need a way to do image matching so that when you look out there and you find images that are published, to be able to match them back to the images in your DAM or in your content marketing repository, so that you can identify images that are yours that are being used. And there's a lot of different ways to match images. There's a lot of different tools out there for image matching. Some use embedded pixels, some use watermarking. We at Fidel, in the demo you'll see, we use really visual similarity matching algorithms that match visual similarity. Sometimes the issue with embedded pixels or watermarks is that they can get distilled or during transformation, or if resolution is reduced, you might lose some of that capability to identify or match that image. So we try to avoid that by doing visual image matching. In that. But again, there's a lot of tools out there, so explore it and see what's available and what works best for the content that you're doing. Then you need an ability to track, which is actually to look at sites and social media feeds. So that's kind of like your binoculars that you're looking through at sites, right? And you want to be able to, when you're and again, there's a lot of different tools out there and technologies that can do tracking and crawling. What you want to be sure that you look for is the ability to be able to keep an eye on your websites, as well as on your social media feeds, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, etc. And there's a lot of differences between a kind of standard brand website, an e-commerce website, a big e-commerce website like Amazon or Target or Walmart, a social media feed like Facebook, a video channel like YouTube. These are all very different mediums on these channels, and they require very different specific types of crawling and tracking to be effective. So make sure you're really looking at what the tool does and what it supports, because you're going to want to be able to cover, of all those that you said you have 5 to 10 places you're publishing, I bet that Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram are most likely in that list. So then, you capture your talent and your rights. You have a way to track the sites and look at the sites through your binoculars. You have a way to match any of the images you find there back to the images in your DAM. Then you want to be able to see, have a tool that shows you that usage, shows you any violations, can look at the data that you have for that site and for your images or videos, and tell you if you have a violation, tell you if you have an expiration, so that you can act accordingly on that content. And in addition to doing that in real time, you want to also be able to run reports and stay on top of that over time. So you want to be able to have regularly scheduled reports that run to show you your usage violations, and especially to show you things that are coming up for expiration, because you want to be able to act on those before you get to expiration, not after content expires, because once it expires, you already have a liability there. So those are kind of the key requirements that you want to look for when you're thinking about having a program to track and monitor your published content. And we're going to see a lot of those features in our demo today. Okay, so let's get into our demo. We're going to play a little game called Where's Willow? And this is based around a scenario where we have a fictional brand ambassador named Willow Lent, and she's a trending model, very popular model these days. And she is one of our brand ambassadors for our fictional Susie Blue beauty and fashion brand. And she's not our exclusive brand ambassador. She's one of many that we use, but we have been featuring her very prominently recently because she's been very popular. So we've been using her heavily. Now, we just found out that our impacting event is that Willow recently signed a licensing deal with another big brand. And maybe it's not even necessarily a direct competitor to us, but it's something peripheral that's going to put her in the spotlight a lot. She's going to be doing a lot of advertising for this brand. And as a company, we want to look at where we're using Willow so that we can address whether or not we want to pull back on our leveraging of Willow in our marketing, right? And maybe we want to pull back on Willow and use some of our other brand ambassadors so that we don't kind of get either associated with another brand or the market gets sick of her, and so that we stand out and keep our differential in our marketing. So the first thing before we can make a decision of what we want to do is we need to be able to find out where's Willow. right? So that we can decide whether we want to minimize her as part of our marketing strategy. And then once we find out where we're using Willow, we need to analyze that usage and rights so that we can come up with a plan. So let's switch over to a demo. Let me share my screen here. There we go. So I'm going to use Brand Vision to show you this. That's Fidel's brand compliance solution that really handles brand compliance from pre-production to post-production. And as I mentioned, we can go very deep on rights management and advanced rights management in this solution. We're not going to do that today, but if you are interested in that, I encourage you to reach out to us or reach out to me after the webinar, because we can certainly talk about rights management in more detail than we're going to today. But we're going to focus really on Brand Vision's ability to do content tracking, monitoring, and providing usage information and reporting. And there are other tools out there, again, so I encourage you to look at what's out there, assess it based on what I'm sharing with you today, and be able to make the best decision for you and your organization and the content that you're working with and the goals that you're trying to achieve. So I've got basically my marketing assets here in Brand Vision. And I'm going to, as I mentioned, the first requirement is really to be able to capture information about the talent and the rights. So I'm going to start by going into my parties, which is really a Rolodex of my talent here. And I'm going to search for Willow, and I'm going to pull up my information on Willow because she's the one I'm concerned about where Willow is. And I can see some information here about Willow and her agent's phone and email. And if I click into that talent profile for Willow, I can see some more further information, such as her social links and excuse me, contact information, and maybe even some characteristics I'm tracking around that particular talent. And we are really interested in the assets that we're using Willow in. So I can very instantly from here click and see the assets that Willow is associated with. So I've been able to capture information about my talent and link that to Willow's assets. And I have two assets here. One is a still where she's in this still photo. And, you know, in a real world scenario, you'd have many more than two, but for purposes of the demo, I like to keep it kind of concise so you can really see what's going on. So we just have two assets set up here, but one is a still photo and one is a 30-second beauty spot. And they're both attached to Willow. Now, as I said, you need to be able to capture information about the talent and also information about the rights. So to capture information about Willow's rights that she's given us, I can also access any agreements that I have with Willow here. So here's my talent agreement for the beauty campaign that I did with Willow. And if I click through to that agreement, I can see some information about the agreement, and I can actually see the rights that Willow gave me as part of her talent agreement. And I can see here that I got from Willow social media rights, so rights for all territories for social media worldwide for about a period of 1.5 years. So it's got an explicit end date to that. And then I also have separate digital rights, which are more open-ended, in perpetuity digital rights for globally for all my digital channels. So for my SEO, for my mobile channel, for my digital media, for my brand website, et cetera. So for all my digital channels, I've gotten the rights in perpetuity from her. So those are the rights that I've got associated with Willow. I've been able to capture the information about the talent and the rights. And again, I can then link those assets to that set of rights so that I know what the rights are for the particular assets. And as I said, we could go much deeper on rights management, but we're not going to today, but be happy to have a follow-up discussion with you if you're interested in more information on how we do that or how to do that in general. But I do have my two assets here. So I'm interested in finding the Willow assets and where they're being used. So let me drill down into my video asset here. And as I click into the video asset, I can now see some information about that particular asset here. And as I said, I had captured the rights, so I can very easily look at this asset and see the rights for this asset. But what I'll also notice is that this isn't Willow in my picture, right? And that's because this is a video, and this video actually has two models in it. It has Madeline, and it also has Willow. So therefore, the rights are a little more complex relating to this asset because I have two contributors. Therefore, it's tied to two different talent agreements. And then I have multiple rights there. So again, advanced rights management comes into play there. We're really only concerned about Willow right now for this use case and where we're using this asset because it has Willow in it. So I'm going to go over to the usage tab and look at where this asset's being used. And here I can see in real time that this asset is being used in 3 different places. So starting at the top, I can see that it was found on our YouTube channel. So it's being used on YouTube. And I can see from my match percentage here on the right that it's 100% match. It's a full match, which means this asset in its entirety, 100% of it was found on my YouTube channel. So this actual video was published to my YouTube channel. And I can see the status is that it's nearing expiration. So it's almost going to expire. And if I look at the rights, it's because I do have rights to social media for this, which includes YouTube, but they're expiring at the end of May. If you remember, there was an explicit outdate for those rights. So, so this is going to expire in 2 weeks. So now that I have that information, I can make a decision and I can say, you know what, it's going to expire in 2 weeks. We did pay Willow for this and we do want to get as much exposure as we can. So let's just let it run out for 2 weeks. And once it expires, we'll pull it down, but we won't pull it down yet. We'll let it get our money's worth and let it stay on YouTube for another 2 weeks. And then we'll have our social team pull that down. Okay, great. So we're able to make a decision on that. The second one here is Beauty Shop Till You Drop. Now, this is a retail partner site, and I can see that the video was found here as well, except that I can see from the match percentage that it's only part of it was found, which means that only part of this asset of ours was found on this site. So then it becomes a question of, well, which part was found, especially because we're interested in Willow. So was Willow found here? And if I look at my keyframe, I can see that from a time signature perspective, the second half of this video from 17 seconds to 30 seconds is what was matched on this beauty shop site. And if I look at the video for that, I can see that the second half here highlighted in red is the part that was identified on the site. And if I click over to that, I can see that, in fact, that is the clip of Willow that was found on that site. So that means Willow is being used on that site as well. Now, in addition to Willow being used there, we don't have rights for her to be used in retail. So this partner took a clip of Willow, re-edited it into a different video, and used it on their site. And if I go and look at that video on their site, I'll see this is a completely different video. It's not the same as my asset. It's a video they created, but if I go into it far enough, I'll see that there's the clip of Willow. So they actually edit it. And then if I go further, I'll see there's other models and other stuff in the video. But they did use Willow in it. So that's a violation of our contract with Willow. So I need to immediately reach out to them and say, hey, pull that down. You're not allowed to use that. You're not allowed to do that. And don't do that again. And if they do it again, well, I have my content tracking, and that's why I need it to make sure that my partners don't do things like that. So very valuable here that we were able to identify that and get that pulled down. Plus, it's another exposure of Willow that we're able to deal with. Now, finally here, the third one is susieblue.com. That's on our website, on our brand website. And if I open that location, I can see the website there. And even though I have valid rights to that, so I do have the rights to use that. And again, this is 100% match. So the full video was found on susieblue.com. And I have the right to do that. It's very prominent at the top of our website here. And so the question becomes, do I want to use this on my website or not? I can use it, but just because I can use it, there's Willow, and Willow's very prominent on our site. So as far as minimizing the use of her in our strategy, we probably want to pull that down. So we can reach out then to our web team and say, you know what, please swap that video out, that first video on our homepage, for a different video that doesn't have Willow. So I've successfully was able to, find this video in 3 places. And then each one had a kind of different status. I was able to assess that, make a decision, and act accordingly based on that. Excuse me. So now let's go back to the other asset, the still image. So if I look at the still image, I can see on this, I've just got Willow, right? And if I look at the contributors, it's only Willow. There's no other model in this. So I can go to the usage and see where this was used. And I can see that this was found also on the susieblue.com website where it's valid. So if I go back to the website for a minute and I scroll down, I should see that image here somewhere. There it is, right? So that was used on the website, and it's still very prominent on my homepage. So maybe I want to pull that down as well. So, you know, two birds on that one. I can tell my website team to take down the video and take down the still image that we're using that are both on the homepage of our site. It also found it on Facebook here. On Facebook, I can see that it was used in a post on Facebook. And the interesting thing about this that I can see is that it's a different image, right? It's not the exact same image of Willow. It's actually Willow was used as an inset on the smartphone with a bunch of marketing text built around it. But it still was able to find that and identify it, which is great because Willow is in it, so we don't want to use it. I can see that it's near expiration, so it hasn't expired. So I could leave it up if I want to, but in this case, Facebook, I can, you know, the content gets shared a lot. It could go viral very quickly. I probably want to pull that down. So I can contact my social team or my Facebook team and say, hey, can we remove that post that has that image of Willow with this particular image, and ask them to remove that. So in both cases, for both those assets, I was very quickly able to see where that asset was used across my brand website, my social media site, my YouTube videos, and act accordingly and pull that content down. So how did I do that, right? How did I set that up? Well, it goes back to, I said you needed to capture your talent and rights information to see this output. You needed to have image matching, which is how we match these images back from what's found on a site with the tracking back to your DAM or your content repository. And then I need that tracking capability. So if I go into my tracking console here, here's how we do that. We set up a number of sites and we look at those sites through those binoculars that we were talking about, and we zero in on the places and the channels where we're publishing our content. And you can see we've got about 5 to 10 set up here, which most of you said you're doing 5 to 10 sites. So it would look something like this. And if I go into my susieblue.com site, I can see how I set that up and define that with my tracker. So I can say, I want to track susieblue.com. I want to track images only, or I want to track videos only, or I want to track both. So Brand Vision has the capability to do either or both. I can then define my site in terms of rights that I need to publish there. So in this case, my site is defined as a worldwide brand website. So if I put content there and I don't have brand website rights, that's going to be a violation. And then I just basically plug in my URL there. And then it's going to scan that site. It's going to track that site on a periodic basis, and which can be configured as far as the frequency. And then it's going to come back and tell me what it found. And in this case, it tracked Susie Blue and it found 17 images and 6 videos. And if I look at what it found, I can see the images that were found on the site. And in some cases, you know, you might be looking at sites that have other images on them that are not yours. So it's going to index, going to look at it and tell you every image that's on the site. And then it'll use the matching to match it to your DAM assets or to your assets in your content. So if I want to just look at those, I can toggle this and see just the matches. And I can see a number of matches here that were matched on the site, including, again, some that have text overlays, et cetera. So you want to be able to have that fidelity level of matching where it's not just an exact image. It could be cropped or resized or have text overlays. And for the images as well, I can do the same thing and look at videos, every video that was found on this site and any matches that I have in my content for that video. And then so that's basically how we do that. And then in addition, you have some advanced capabilities where you can restrict target the tracking more by things like specific URL patterns, or sizes of images or lengths of videos. So those are like dials to be able to dial in the tracking in very specific ways. So the more sophisticated your tracking and the better fidelity and capability that your matching has, the more needles you're going to catch in your net, so to speak, when you do your tracking. And then for things like social media, for example, works a little bit differently, because in social media, in many cases, you're only allowed to crawl things that you're an administrator of. So in that case, you might need to provide credentials. So in this case, you have to connect your Facebook credentials up to your Facebook page in order to index it. But once you do that, you can then index it, and it will find, again, all your images that are in that Facebook feed and match them to the images back in your DAM system. So, with those tools in place, we were able to very quickly find where's Willow. We were able to find all our Willow assets. We were able to track those, find where they were published. We were able to see the information and take action. There's one other use case kind of related to that I wanted to demonstrate, which is kind of more of instead of looking out, looking in. And this is a use case around frequently what we hear from customers is that somebody, maybe usually an agent or something, sees a picture, let's say Willow's agent sees a picture of Willow on a retail site and says, hey, I don't think they have the rights to use this. And they take that image and they email you, they attach that image, they email it to you, and they say, you don't have the rights to use this image, pull it down, cease and desist. And so you have this image and you don't even know what the image is or where to look for it. You're just getting this, angry email from an agent or a licensee, a licensor that licensed you content. So in that case, you can apply that same matching technology to look inward at your DAM to find that image very quickly, because you want to quickly respond to that. If somebody's accusing you of using content in violation, you want to quickly respond to that. So I can actually take that photo of Willow that was sent to me via email, upload it into my system, and instantly find it in my DAM visually. So, because I don't know if it's the same name, I don't have the ID, I don't have any of the metadata, but I can visually find that instantly. And then I can look at that asset details and say, okay, this was for a beauty product campaign using Willow lens. So it does appear to be Willow, but let me look at the rights I have for this. I do in fact have rights for North America retail. And I noticed that actually the agreement that I have for this is with Get Me Images, which is a stock photography stock licensing, image licensing company. So I actually licensed this image from them. It has Willow in it, but it was licensed from Get Me Images. And if I look again at those rights, I do have those rights for North America retail. And if I need to see the actual agreement, I can also attach the PDF of the agreement here, and I can open that up and look at the actual licensing agreement that I have with Get Me Images to make sure that I have the rights. But I've captured all that information here, and with Image Match, I'm able to instantly find that image and see the rights that I've captured for the talent through the license here from Get Me. So I can easily respond back by going to my Image Match here and saying, you know what, let me print out a little report on that. I can generate a report for that in a Word doc format, attach that to an email, reply back to the email and say, here's the information. We have that image. We identified what it was. We do have North American retail rights, and it's licensed through an agreement. It's agreement number 12735 with Get Me Images. And I can just send that right back and case closed. So not only were we able to find, where Willow is when she's published, but we're actually able to find where Willow is in the DAM as well, which is very useful functionality as well. So the last requirement I had on my list was around reporting. We were able to see stuff here in the Brand Vision system in real time, seeing where stuff's being used or what our rights are for certain things or our rights status. But I also want to be able to report on that, right? So I want to have reporting capabilities as well. So I want to have the ability, for example, to look at all my usage violations over time and see what those were. I want to have the ability to track that report and see all my assets and where they were used. So I can see where all these assets were used, what sites they were used on. I can see if there were any violations around missing rights or expirations. I can, export that report in a variety of formats. I can email that report to somebody, or I can subscribe to that report. I can actually set up that report to be sent to me or a brand manager or to my boss or whoever I want on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to get that information out of the system. And that subscribing to the report or having that automatic report frequently is really important when it comes to expirations. So you really want to have some sort of expiration reporting capability that can show you all your assets and talent that have rights that are expiring, when they're expiring, which rights are expiring, and have that in a report that you can then subscribe to and receive, on a weekly basis, daily, weekly basis, depending upon how often you're having content expiring, so that, again, you can react to that. We've got 14 days before this expires, plenty of time for us to pull it down so we don't end up, in a lawsuit with somebody over that. So that kind of covers the full requirements there. Again, just to recap them, capture your talent information and your rights information, have the ability to track different sites and look at different sites, index and crawl the content on different websites, social media, YouTube, and other places. And then have the ability to visually match those images to it, because in the absence of metadata or watermarking or ID matching, you want to be able to have some visual matching so that you can match those back to content in your DAM or match things directly into your DAM, as we saw in that last example. And then you want to be able to see that usage information in your tools so that you can see in real time what's being used where and if it's currently in a violation or nearing a state of expiration. And you want to be able to have those reports that you can generate out of the system on an ongoing basis to be informed, to remain informed about where your content is published and what the status of it is regarding rights, restrictions, compliance, governance, and all those things. So, so that was our Where's Willow demonstration. We were able to come up with our strategy and devise our strategy around our brand ambassador, Willow, but we couldn't have done it without having those content tracking and monitoring tools. If you liked what you saw and you kind of want to see how that might look on your website, today only for this webinar, we're saying asking you to send us your URL if you want. You can send us your brand website URL, send it to solutions@fidel.com, and we'll plug it into our tracking and we'll run it through just what we ran through those sites for the demo, and we'll send you back some of the results that come out in our tracking console. We won't be able to do all the violation matching because we don't have all your rights information and stuff, but we'll give you a good idea of what your website looks like when you just plug the tracking in and kind of see the content getting indexed. And it's kind of cool to start to see how you can have that binocular bead on your website. So we encourage you to send that along to solutions@fidel.com. Just drop us a quick email with your URL and we'll get back to you with some results. So I think we have time for some questions and answers. So hopefully you all have been thinking about a lot of different things and feeding in some questions. So Stephanie, what do we got?
Yeah, we got a lot of good questions coming in. Thank you to the audience for those. I got to say, Greg, my favorite line of the whole presentation was the needle in a pile of needles. We're not even talking haystacks anymore. We're talking needles in a pile of needles.
They're sharp. They hurt sometimes,
Right. That was fantastic. That was great. Okay, so let's see here. Let me go to this one first. Charlotte wants to know, can you automatically pull and replace? So if you find you no longer have rights to a certain photo or whatever, what does that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, you can. That's going to be an integration question of integrating with the systems that are publishing your content. So to the extent that you're using a system to publish your content that has the ability to have APIs that can connect into a system that has, like BrandVision, that has that data, you can drive takedowns off that data. So BrandVision, for example, has a fully open public API library. So that usage information and that expiration information can be fed into external systems. We do connect with a variety of DAMs. So a lot of the DAMs that we already connect with do expose rights information and expiration information back to the DAM, but they're not necessarily the systems that control publishing and takedown. A lot of times that's a different system that's handling your social media publishing and stuff like that. So as long as it can communicate via APIs, it can be done. It becomes a question of what does your landscape look like? What's your technology? How does it hook up, et cetera?
So that's great. And that's a good segue because we have a question from Erica and Hope asking about DAMs, in terms of, integration there. I mean, can you point our attendees to a list of DAMs that you integrate with, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And our whole, mantra as a company has always kind of been support the DAM with kind of extended functionality around rights management and now content tracking and monitoring, which are typically things that the DAMs aren't as focused on, right? So, and especially as you get into the more complex scenarios, it becomes hard to manage some of that within a dam. So we, again, provide those APIs to connect to any dam that can connect to us. We can connect up for transfer of rights information bidirectionally. So you can do things like attach rights from within a dam, view availability back into the dam, perform rights clearance. And then that usage information is also can also be made back available through the dam. We do have connectors to most of the major dam players out there. So your Adobes, your OpenTexts, and then your Widens, your Primos, Binder, et cetera. We have different levels of connectors with all those dams, and they all have small variations in what they do because the platforms allow for different types of integration. But on some of our more mature connectors, we're doing everything from, again, and being able to enter rights from the dam, but yet store them in an external rights system, perform clearance, do filtering, search filtering in the dam based on rights information, which is cool. And view that usage information, which is also useful back in the dam as well. So if you have a specific question about a specific dam or want the full list, just reach out to us. Be happy to talk about it with you.
Fantastic. Okay. Erica's also asking, what standard operating procedures can you recommend when referring to or dealing with, I guess, expired assets? What's your recommendation there?
Well, it's one of the most important things to deal with because, it's one of the things that could easily lead to you having a violation that results in legal action. So it's really important. And I think, first thing, again, is you need to know what the expiration date is. And to the extent that you have multiple talent tied to a particular asset, or you have a video that has multiple clips or music and things like that, right? You need to be able to capture that information so that you can distill it down to what is my actual expiration date. And sometimes people always ask me this, like, do you store expiration date? Expiration date, you could have 4 different expiration dates for a piece of content, right? Because it expires for social media on one date, it expires for websites on another, it expires for print in something else, right? So you have to be able to capture that data and have a tool to analyze it. And that's obviously something that Fidel has been doing for a long time. And we have lots of, robust ways to do that. And then the reporting on it. So standard operating procedure is to have that data and be able to, it doesn't do you any good if you're not getting it regularly, right? So getting reports on what's going to expire ahead of it expiring so that you can act accordingly. And then some dams also will restrict your access to it based on that, right? And so to the extent that you're doing external rights management, we always say as well, like, the dam, when you're connected up with us for rights management, we handle that rights management piece, but the dam still handles access to the content. So then you want to potentially look at, how do I prevent people from using something if it's already expired? And so that's really a decision customers make based on their platform and what it's capable of, and also their governance of what they want to do, of allow people to use something. Some lock it down when there's an expiration date. So hopefully that helps a little bit with the answer.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think you're spot on because, expiration dates vary based on the asset and where it lives. I mean, we deal with this at Content Marketing Institute all the time. We have celebrities who speak at our events, and certain things can be on YouTube for X amount of time. They can be in our on-demand system for a different amount of time. So it's a lot to keep track of. And I think with influencers working with brands so much these days, you gotta protect yourself.
And I think for a long time, a lot of folks just got used to it being not that complicated, right? Like, I have an asset and it has an expiration date, or it has a country I can use it in and a channel I can use it in, very simple. But everything in the world is getting more complicated daily, right? And so the more channels you have, the more talent you have, the more savvy these agreements get in chopping up the way you can and can't use things. I think even smaller companies are now starting to see that it's becoming a challenge and it's not as easy as it used to be. So,
yeah, for sure. In the poll at the start of the webinar, you talked about, how teams often have to, or will go through a refresh, or, will rebrand themselves. So great question here. Can I use this tool to find out if my old logo is being used anywhere?
Yeah.
Obviously, if you update your logo, you want to get rid of the old ones, right?
Yeah, this is a big problem when you do a rebranding, right? Because you spend millions on it, and then you go out and your old logo's still out there, right? And so yes, you can, because the image matching capabilities can find that logo. So you can really instantly look at your sites, all of your sites, like we did today for Willow. But instead of looking for Willow, you're looking for your logo, and you're going to be able to find that, whether it's like we had the shot where Willow was part of a larger marketing piece. So it's going to find your logo within larger marketing pieces. It's going to, if you have videos with your logo, it'll match those videos. Object matching within video is something we're still looking at, getting to a level where we can match an object within a video specifically. So that's coming. You know, your logo might still be out there beyond your sites. So that's another problem, right? Is because once it's out there, somebody grabs it and they put it on their blog or whatever, and it's out there. One thing we're also looking at integrating for brand vision as well, but you can use it today, is Google Vision, right? Which is kind of a reverse image search where you can plug a logo in and say, find my logo on the web. So that's a really powerful tool for doing a wider search of an even bigger pile of needles. And we're actually looking at integrating that into brand vision, so that from within that one console, not only can you see it on your sites, but you can also get a Google Vision view of that.
That's amazing. Fantastic. Tina's got a great question here. Are the rules around rights management the same for government, social media, and nonprofit organizations where information may need to stay on public record for a while?
Interesting question, you know, and different kind of restriction, right? I would say, rather than kind of licensing, typical licensing rights. But we often talk about corporate governance as well. And governance, it doesn't necessarily revolve around talent rights. That's a piece of governance, but you might have other, you know, corporate restrictions around the way you use content. And we do hear that a lot in things like pharmaceutical industries, right? Where there's a lot of restrictions about how you publish content and stuff. So, you know, it's different than rights management, but yet the data itself is very similar to rights management. So if you have a tool that can capture complex iterations of distribution channels, date ranges, geographies, you can define that to handle any kind of restrictions that you need to. So it all comes down to how you're defining your rights. Maybe you're not defining them as, you know, website and Facebook. Maybe you're defining them as, government publication or whatever it might be specifically. And I'm sorry, I don't know all the terms for that particular use case, but in brand vision, for example, you can change all those definitions, right? So you can set up a very complex taxonomy of restrictions. We typically call them rights, but they could be anything. So as long as you have that data structure, you can apply that same thing to a government use case, pharmaceutical use case, educational publishing use case is another one we see where it's not your typical kind of, marketing licensing rights or consumer products rights. It's different. So we do all that. We do a lot of consumer product stuff too, where it's not about Facebook and website. It's about T-shirt and baseball cap, right? So certainly, just the tool is the same. The vernacular changes.
Excellent. Okay. So Willow, you showed us photos of Willow. You showed us videos of Willow. What about audio files? Yeah. How do you track? Can you track and match those?
Good question. We're just now looking into how we do that. So because we do hear a lot of that from customers as far as tracking audio. It's still kind of around tracking an asset that has audio in it. So if we find that video, it's the video with the audio in it, so we can track it back to the licensing for the audio that's on that video. So we cover, with the Venn diagram, like we cover some of that, right? Just by virtue of being able to find that video. And the music licensing is probably the biggest area for this, because you have very strict rights and licensing around music, and how long you can use it for, how much of it you can use, where you can use it. So that's the biggest one we hear about from our customers who are, big brands. But we are actually now also looking at audio matching per se. So the same way we can look at an image and match it visually to an image, look at a video and match it to a video, which by the way is really just a series of images, right? Because it's keyframes. Looking at audio matching to audio, which really is very similar. You're just looking at a WAV file signature and comparing it to a WAV file signature. And again, there's already tons of tools out there for that, and they do that on YouTube, and they do that on sites where you're posting stuff. Facebook will shut down your video if it detects a song, and so that we're talking to partners who have those technologies to see how we can best blend them into this. So I anticipate that's not far down the road for us to be able to do explicit audio matching and tracking as well.
Excellent. Okay, and thinking about some B2C businesses, there's a question here, which is great. Can you find assets on Amazon?
You can. So I alluded to this earlier before, which is that as you get to the bigger retail sites, the sites become more complicated. So when you're talking about a brand website, it's a pretty standard website in most cases. You can crawl it with a crawler. You can get all the content, not too difficult. When you get to Amazon or Target or Walmart, sites like that, the technology underpinnings of the site are much more complicated. And a lot of times that content's being served up directly from databases or through APIs in ways that make a traditional crawler ineffective. So you typically have to develop a special crawler for those sites, and each one might require its own type of crawler. So we had to, in the early days of launching our content tracking products, we had to build a special crawler for Amazon in order to get the results we wanted, because it just wasn't able to get, it wasn't able to understand that when you go to Amazon, you have to go down to a category level, and then you have to go down to a product page level to get to what you were looking for in most cases. So we had to build some specialty there, and we call that a premium crawler, because it requires additional development to make it work. So it can work. It does work. We do track images on Amazon. We're adding actually video for Amazon in our next quarterly release in Q3. Same video matching that I showed today will be available on Amazon. And some of the other big sites, we're looking at what it will take to support those as well.
Great. You did talk about this before in terms of YouTube and Facebook, but maybe elaborate just a little bit on the question of tracking assets on social sites. There's a lot of social sites these days, right? So
yeah, there are, and it's a kind of a similar answer to the one I just gave on Amazon. Everyone's different, right? And so they all have different technologies in play potentially, and they all have different guidelines of what they allow. So, for example, for Facebook, they won't let you crawl all of Facebook or scan all of Facebook. They'll only let you scan your stuff that you administer. And so you have to provide a credential and log in order to be able to crawl and look at that page. And so it's mostly around Facebook pages. And then on Instagram, it's only your Instagram feed that you can crawl. And again, each of those required building a specific crawler. And this is why, we take the time in Brand Vision to do that, to go out and understand each platform and build something that works, because it's never going to be one tool does everything well. You really have to tweak it for each thing. And then, the other challenge is we had a Twitter crawler until changes were made at Twitter that shut that crawler down, and so you never know what's going to happen at a particular place where they might say, our API is now going to cost a lot of money, so we have to be prepared for that as well. It's an ever shifting landscape. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Greg, I can't let you go or this conversation go without at least one question about AI.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Here it comes. I knew it was going to be AI. I knew it.
You knew it was, right?
I knew it, because you can't have a conversation today without those two letters cropping into it.
Right. So I got to say, when we know people are creating assets with AI, photography with AI, videos with AI, what's your take?
Yeah, well, we've been talking about AI for a long time, but different types of AI than I think everybody's talking about in the moment. We do apply AI techniques to some of the matching that we do. So our matching does incorporate some AI from the similarity matching and viewpoint of being able to understand what the visual similarities are between images. So some of the matching you saw and some of the stuff we do on the content services side does involve that. But again, not like what we're talking about these days with ChatGPT and everything like that that's coming up. I do think it's going to impact everything, eventually in different ways. I see AI really initially coming in much more on the front end of the process around content creation, and being able to create content based on that, but which isn't really a focus of Fidel's, right? But content curation And managing that content and searching that content, I think, is where it probably will initially touch us first. We've already been talking about how we could leverage it to do more human-based searching. So instead of, your typical search of a dam is through a metadata form, right? Mm-hmm. That's going away because I'm going to be able to say, hey, I want an image that has mountains and flowers and it evokes the feeling of a romantic spring and, and lovers running through a field, right? And boom, I can search my dam and find something that looks like that, or I can create something like that, right? If it doesn't exist. So, but from the searchability aspect, I think that's something we'll be looking at is how do we build that into searchability. On the content tracking side, I think it's probably going to be more around analytics and assessment. So bringing that to bear on recommendation, right? So AI recommend to me, how should I publish this asset based on my previous usage patterns, where I had violations, where I didn't, where I had success, et cetera. And so using it to make kind of recommendations about publishing strategies or where to publish things or how to manage that content post-production, but it remains to be seen. It's an exciting, brave new world. For sure.
Brave new world indeed. It is evolving very quickly, no doubt about it. Thank you for such a great presentation. Thank you to the audience for the great questions. Don't forget, you can send your URL here and the team at Fidel welcomes it. I think that's great. Thank you for offering that. I also want to say to our audience, I know you're doing great content marketing. I know you are. You've been doing great content marketing for all year and beyond. So show it off to us. Our content marketing awards are coming up. The deadline is coming up. We'd love for you to enter your best work, show it off. Appreciate your teams for the work they do. And my other pitch here is join us for Content Marketing World in September. We'll be in Washington, D.C. this year. It's going to be great. The agenda will be published very soon. It's fantastic. We have over 100 sessions already scheduled and more to come, and we hope to see you there. Greg, thank you so much for your time. To the team and everybody joining us here. Again, we will send you a link to the on-demand version of today's live recording. In about 24 hours, it'll be waiting for you in your inbox if you want to watch again or share with a colleague. Many thanks, Greg. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Bye, everyone.
Bye.